As I look back upon the cases of Sherlock Holmes, which I recorded between the years 1882 and 1890, I find them all so interesting and strange that it is no easy matter to decide which to select and which to leave untold. Some have already gained fame through publication in the newspapers. Others, though equally worthy of record, have never yet been given to the public. Some remain mysteries which even Holmes's analytical powers failed to penetrate, while others were only partially solved, and that without the complete chain of logical evidence which Holmes so highly prized, but rather through conjecture and surmise. Among them all, however, there is one which, although some of its aspects remain unexplained and must ever remain so, I feel compelled to place upon record. In the year 87, we encountered a number of cases of greater or lesser interest. Looking back over my notes, I find the record of the adventure of the Paradol Chamber, the curious case of the amateur mendicant society who held luxurious clubrooms in the cellar of a furniture warehouse, the disappearance of the British bark Sophie Anderson, the singular experience of Grice Patterson upon the island of Uffa, and finally the Camberwell poisoning case. In the latter, it will be remembered, Holmes demonstrated that the deceased had wound up his watch 2 hours before his death, thus proving that he had gone to bed at that hour and providing a most important clue to the solution of the mystery. I may one day write of these cases, but none of them impressed me so deeply as the one I am about to relate. It was toward the close of September, and the equinoctial gales were blowing with exceptional violence. All day the wind had screamed and howled, and the rain had lashed incessantly against the windows. Nature seemed to be asserting her primitive power against the ordered civilization of London, like a wild beast roaring behind the bars of its cage. Toward evening the storm increased in fury, and the wind moaned through the chimney like a child sobbing in distress. Sherlock Holmes sat upon one side of the fireplace, carefully indexing his criminal records, while I occupied the other side, absorbed in one of Clark Russell's fine sea stories. The sound of the storm began to mingle with the tale I was reading, the crash of waves upon a rocky shore blending with the ceaseless patter of the rain. As my wife had gone to stay with her mother for a few days, I was lodging once more in my old rooms in Baker Street. "How strange," I remarked, glancing at my companion. "I'm sure that I heard the bell ring. Whoever can it be at such an hour? It must be one of your friends." "I have no friends but you," replied Holmes, "and I do not encourage visitors." "Then perhaps a client? If so, the case must be a serious one. On such a night as this, for what other reason would a man come so far?" "I still believe it to be a friend of the landlady." Sherlock Holmes was mistaken, however, for the sound of footsteps in the hall was followed by a knock at the door. Raising the lamp and directing its light toward the empty chair intended for the visitor, Holmes called out, "Come in." A young man of about 22 entered. His dress was neat, his manners refined and gentlemanly. The dripping umbrella he carried, and the shining waterproof coat he wore, told plainly of the weather he had passed through. As he glanced anxiously toward Holmes, I could see by the lamplight the pallor of his face and the deep sadness in his eyes. It was evident that he was burdened by some great trouble. Adjusting his gold-rimmed spectacles, he said, "I owe you an apology. I hope I am not intruding, though I am aware that I have brought a little of the storm and rain from outside into your warm room." "Give me your coat and umbrella," said Holmes. "They will dry by the fire. I observe that you have come from the southwest." "Yes, from Horsham. The clay and chalk upon the toes of your boots betray it. I have come to seek your advice. That is easily given, and your assistance. That is not always so easy. I was told of you, Mr. Holmes." Major Prendergast spoke of the way in which you extricated him from the Tankerville Club scandal. "Ah, yes. He was accused of cheating at cards. He told me that you could solve anything." He exaggerated. He said you were invincible. I've been beaten 4 times, 3 by men and once by a woman. A small matter compared with your triumphs, surely. It is true that I am generally successful. Then perhaps you will succeed in this case as well. Draw your chair closer to the fire and tell me your story. This is no ordinary matter. None of the cases brought to me ever are. I am a last resort. That may be, yet I doubt whether, with all your experience, you have ever encountered anything as mysterious or terrible as the events that have overtaken my family. You have aroused my curiosity, said Holmes. Begin at the beginning and tell me the essential facts. The young man drew his chair closer to the hearth and stretched his feet toward the flames. My name is John Openshaw, he began. Yet, as you will see, the matter scarcely concerns me personally. It is an inheritance, a curse handed down through my family. And so I must tell you everything from the start. My grandfather had 2 sons, my uncle Elias and my father Joseph. My father owned a small factory in Coventry. He was the inventor of the Openshaw non-puncturable tire, and during the early days of the bicycle, he prospered greatly. Later, he sold his business for a sum sufficient to last him a lifetime and retired from active work. My uncle Elias, however, emigrated to America while still a young man and became a farmer there. He owned a considerable plantation in Florida. During the American Civil War, he served first under Jackson and later under Hood, eventually rising to the rank of colonel. When Lee surrendered, my uncle returned to his plantation and remained there for several years. In 1869 or 1870, he came back to Europe and purchased a small estate near Horsham in Sussex. He had accumulated a large fortune in America, and his reason for leaving was a deep hatred of the Negroes. He could not tolerate the rights that had been granted to them. He was a strange man, quick-tempered, foul-mouthed, and intensely solitary. During his years in Horsham, I doubt whether he ever set foot in the town. He owned a few fields and a garden around the house, and when he went outside, he confined himself to those grounds. Often he would remain in his room for weeks at a time, drinking brandy and smoking incessantly, refusing all society, even that of his own brother. I was the one exception. He was very fond of me. I was about 12 years old when I first went to live with him, around 1878. He begged my father to allow it. He treated me kindly, played draughts with me when he was in good spirits, and entrusted me with dealings with servants and tradesmen. By the time I was 16, the management of the entire household rested with me. All the keys were in my possession, and I could go anywhere at any time, except for one room in the attic. This was a storeroom for unused furniture, and no one, not even myself, was allowed to enter. Once, out of childish curiosity, I peeped through the keyhole, but saw nothing beyond boxes and parcels. In March of 1883, a letter arrived from abroad and lay upon the tray on my uncle's desk. Letters were rare, as he paid all his bills in cash and had no friends. Taking it up, he remarked, "From India, Pondicherry, by the postmark. What can this be?" He tore it open, and 5 small orange pips fell upon the tray. I laughed, but the expression on my uncle's face froze me in my seat. He had turned deathly pale. His eyes were staring wildly, and his hands trembled as he held the envelope. "Ka-ka-ka," he cried. My God! At last my sins have found me out." "What is it, uncle?" I asked. "Death," he replied, and staggered from the room. My heart was pounding with fear. I picked up the envelope and saw that, written in red ink just above the flap, were the 3 letters, KKK. Though the envelope contained nothing but the 5 orange pips, I could not imagine why he should be so terrified. When I went upstairs, I saw him descending the staircase with a rusty key, evidently that of the attic, in one hand and a small brass box like a cash box in the other. "They may do what they like, but I will not give in," he muttered fiercely. Tell Mary to light the fire in my room and go at once to fetch the lawyer." I obeyed. When the lawyer arrived, my uncle summoned me to his room. The fire was blazing, and on the grate lay a heap of ashes, clearly the remains of the letter. The brass box stood open and empty beside the hearth. I noticed, with astonishment, that upon its lid were engraved the same 3 letters, KKK. "John," said my uncle, "I want you to witness this will. I leave my estate, with all its assets and liabilities, to your father, and after him to you. If you can live here in peace, well and good. If not, then give the property to your bitterest enemy. I am sorry to leave you such a legacy, but I do not know how this will end." He then signed where the lawyer indicated, and I added my own signature as witness. The whole affair deeply disturbed me. Though weeks passed without incident and my fears gradually subsided, I observed a marked change in my uncle. He drank more heavily than ever and withdrew still further from human contact. At times he would burst from his room in a drunken frenzy, revolver in hand, running wildly through the garden, shouting that he feared no man, not even the devil, and that he would not be driven like a chicken into a coop. Yet such outbursts were short-lived. Terror would soon overwhelm him, and he would flee back to his room and lock the door behind him. On one such occasion, even in the depth of winter, his face was drenched with sweat. To come to the point, Mr. Holmes, one night he left the house in one of these fits of rage and never returned. We searched for him and found his body lying face down in the shallow ornamental pond at the edge of the garden. There were no marks of violence, and the water was barely half a meter deep. The jury, knowing his strange behavior, returned a verdict of suicide, but I knew how desperately he feared death and could not believe it. Still, nothing could be done, and my father inherited the estate and £14,000. Holmes interrupted. "The date of the letter and the date of your uncle's death, if you please." The letter arrived on March 10th, 1883. My uncle died 7 weeks later on the night of May 2nd. "Thank you. Pray continue." When my father inherited the estate at Horsham, we carefully examined the attic, which had until then always remained locked at my request. Although its contents had been destroyed, we found a brass box there. On the inside of the lid were the initials KKK, and beneath them the words letters, memoranda, receipts, and register. These headings showed the nature of the papers that the colonel had destroyed. In the attic, we found nothing else of importance beyond this box and various scattered papers and notebooks relating to my uncle's life in America. Some describe how well he had performed his duties during the war and how brave a soldier he had been. Others were political writings concerning the reconstruction of the southern states. It was clear that my uncle had been an active opponent of the politicians sent down from the north. My father settled at Horsham early in '84. Everything went smoothly until January of '85. On the morning of the 4th of January, as I was having breakfast with my father, I heard him cry out in astonishment. He was sitting there holding a newly opened envelope in one hand and 5 orange pips in the other. Up to that point, he had always laughed at my stories about my uncle, regarding them as mere nonsense. But when the same thing happened to him, he was struck with terror. What does this mean, John?" he stammered. I was frozen with fear and said, "KKK." He looked inside the envelope and cried out, "You're right. Here it says KKK. But what is written above it?" Looking over his shoulder, I read, "Put the papers on the sundial." "What papers?" "Which sundial?" he asked. "There is only one sundial, the one in the garden," I replied. "The papers must be those my uncle destroyed." "Nonsense," he said, pulling himself together. "This is a civilized country. We're not going to give in to such absurdities. Where was this posted?" "From Dundee," I said, looking at the postmark. "Someone must be playing a stupid joke," he said. What have I to do with sundials and papers? I will take no notice of this nonsense. You should go to the police, I said, and make a fool of myself? Then I will go. No, I cannot allow that either. I will not trouble the police with such nonsense. There was no point arguing with my father, for he was extremely stubborn. I said nothing more, but an inner voice told me that something terrible was going to happen. 3 days after the arrival of the letter, my father went to visit his old friend, Major Freebody, the commandant of the fortifications at Portsdown Hill. I was glad he went, thinking that he would be safe while away from home. I was mistaken. The day after he left, I received a telegram from the major asking me to come at once. My father had fallen into one of the deep chalk pits nearby. His skull was fractured and he was unconscious. I hurried there, but he died before regaining consciousness. It appeared that he had been returning from Fareham at dusk, and that there was no fence around the chalk pit. The jury did not hesitate to record a verdict of death by accident. I examined every clue relating to my father's death, but found no marks on his body, no footprints nearby, no strangers in the vicinity, and no indication of robbery. Yet I must tell you that I was not satisfied, and I was almost convinced that he had been lured into a treacherous trap. Thus I inherited this sinister legacy. You may ask why I did not renounce the inheritance. My answer is that I believed all these troubles were somehow connected with what my uncle had done during his lifetime, and that wherever I went I would still be in danger. My poor father died in January of 1885. For 2 years and 8 months, I lived peacefully at Horsham. Just when I began to think that the curse had ended with the previous generation, I realized that I had been mistaken. Yesterday morning, the very same thing that happened to my father happened to me. The young man took a crumpled envelope from his waistcoat pocket, turned it upside down, and 5 orange pips fell onto the table. This is what arrived, he continued. Judging by the postmark, it came from London, from the East End. It bears the same writing as the one sent to my father. The letters Kikakin, the words, put the papers on the sundial. And what did you do? Nothing. Nothing. Covering his face with his delicate white hands, he said, "To tell you the truth, I felt helpless, like a mouse in a cat's claws. I thought I had no way to resist and no means of escape. No, cried Sherlock Holmes. You must act, or you're lost. Action is the only thing that can save you. There is no time for despair." I went to the police. Indeed, they listened with smiles. I am certain the inspector believed the letters were merely a joke, and like the jury, he saw no connection between the letters and the deaths of my uncle and father. Holmes clenched his fist and struck the air. "Fools!" he cried. "Nevertheless, they assigned a policeman to guard my house. Did he come here with you?" "No, he was ordered to remain at the house." Holmes cried out again. "Why did you come here?" he shouted. "More importantly, why did you not come at once?" "I don't know. I was only able to speak with Major Prendergast today, and he recommended you to me. You received the letter 2 days ago. You should have acted sooner. You have nothing else that might help us besides the evidence you have placed before us, do you?" "There is one more thing," said John Openshaw. He searched his pockets and placed a faded blue piece of paper on the table. "As far as I remember," he said, "when my uncle burned the papers, the edges of some did not burn completely. The small fragments among the ashes were this color. I found this paper on the floor of my uncle's room. It must have fallen from among the others and escaped destruction. Aside from the orange pips, this is the only thing we have that might be of some help. I believe it came from my uncle's private diary. I have no doubt the handwriting is his." Holmes brought the lamp closer, and we both bent over the paper. Its jagged edge showed that it had been torn from a notebook. At the top was written March 1869, and beneath it the following obscure entries. 4. Hudson came. Same old plan. 7. Send orange pips to Macaulay, Paramore, and John Swain. 9. Macaulay's affair completed. 10. John Swain's affair completed. 12. Visited Paramore. All went well. As Holmes folded the paper and returned it to our visitor, he said, "Thank you. From this moment on, you must not lose a second. There is no time even to discuss what you have told me. You must go home immediately and take action." "What am I to do?" "There is only one thing to do, and you must do it at once. Place this paper in the brass box. Then write another note explaining the situation, stating that your uncle destroyed all the papers and that only this single page remains. Make it convincing. After that, place the box on the sundial as they demand. Do you understand me?" "Perfectly. Do not think of revenge for now. I believe we can punish them by lawful means, but first we must plan." They have already set their plan in motion. Our first task is to get you out of danger. After that, we will unravel this mystery and bring the criminals to justice. The young man rose and reached for his raincoat. "Thank you very much," he said. "You have given me hope and, as it were, restored me to life. I shall follow your instructions to the letter. Lose no time, and above all take care of yourself, for I have no doubt that the threat is real and very close. How will you return home?" "I shall take the train from Waterloo. It is not yet 9 o'clock. The streets will not be deserted. You should be safe for the moment, but remain cautious. I am armed." "Good. I shall begin work on this case tomorrow. Then I hope we shall meet again at Horsham." "No, the key to your case lies in London. I shall conduct my investigation here. Then I shall come back here in a day or two to tell you what has become of the box and the paper. You may be sure I shall follow your advice exactly." He shook our hands and took his leave. Outside, the savage howling of the wind and the rain beating fiercely against the window continued. This strange and wild tale seemed to have emerged from amid the raging forces of nature, like a piece of seaweed cast ashore by the storm, only to be swept back again into the furious waves. Sherlock Holmes sat for some time in silence, his head bowed and his eyes fixed upon the fire. At last he lit his pipe, leaned back, and watched the blue rings of smoke rising one after another toward the ceiling. "Watson," he said at last, "I believe this case is one of the most interesting we have encountered, except for the sign of 4. You may be right, except for the sign of 4. Still, in my opinion, John Openshaw's situation is even more dangerous than Sholto's." "But have you formed a clear idea of what these dangers are?" "There is no doubt about the dangers he faces," Holmes replied. "Then what are they? Who are these KKK, and why are they pursuing this unfortunate family?" Sherlock Holmes closed his eyes, rested his elbows on the arms of his chair, and brought the tips of his fingers together. "A perfect reasoner," he said, "can deduce the entire chain of events leading up to an incident, and even predict what will follow from a single clue. Just as Cuvier could reconstruct an entire animal from a single bone, so too can an observer who thoroughly understands one link in a chain accurately describe both the preceding and succeeding events. As yet, we have not reached conclusions that can be derived purely by logic. We may, however, reach a result by examining the problems that others attempt to solve by relying on their emotions. To reach the highest level of this art, the reasoner must possess all the relevant knowledge. Something rare, even in this age of encyclopedias and free education. Still, it is not impossible for a man to acquire everything he needs to know. That is all I attempt to do. If I remember correctly, when we first met, you defined my limitations quite precisely." "Yes," I replied with a laugh. "It was a rare occasion. I recall rating your knowledge of philosophy, astronomy, and politics as nil, botany as variable, geology as profound, especially regarding mud stains within 80 kilometers of the city, chemistry as eccentric, anatomy as unsystematic, sensational literature and crime records as unparalleled. A violin playing, sword wielding, boxing maniac who poisons himself with cocaine and tobacco, a lawyer, according to my notes. My last remark made Holmes smile. In any case, he continued, a man should store the furniture he is likely to use in the attic of his brain and place the rest on the shelves of his library for reference as needed. To solve tonight's case, we must gather all our resources. Please hand me the volume of the American Encyclopedia under K. Thank you. Now let us examine the situation and see what conclusions we can draw. First, we must assume that Colonel Openshaw had a compelling reason to leave America. Men of his age do not willingly abandon Florida's pleasant climate to live in seclusion in an English country town, giving up all their former habits, unless they are afraid of someone or something. His extreme withdrawal in England suggests fear. Thus, we may assume that the same fear drove him to flee America. The only way to understand that fear is to examine the terrible letters sent to the colonel and his heirs. Did you notice the postmarks on the envelopes? The first was from Pondicherry, the second from Dundee, and the third from London, from the East End of London. And what conclusion did you draw from that? They're all port cities. The sender must be traveling by sea. Excellent. That gives us a clue. Now consider another point. There are 7 weeks between the Pondicherry letter and the colonel's death, but only 3 or 4 days between the Dundee letter and the second death. Does that suggest anything to you? The murderer had a greater distance to travel, but the letter also had farther to travel. Then I must admit I have missed the crucial point. We may assume that the sender or senders were traveling by sailing ship. It appears they sent their strange warnings before setting out. You will have noticed how little time passed between the Dundee letter and the death. Had they traveled by steamship from Pondicherry, they would have arrived almost simultaneously with the letter, yet there was a delay of 7 weeks. This difference likely reflects the slower speed of a sailing vessel compared to a steamer. That is possible, and highly probable. Now you understand the urgency of the situation and why I warned Openshaw. Each death occurred at the end of the sender's voyage. But since the last letter was posted from London, there was no time to lose. Good heavens, I exclaimed. What could be the motive behind such relentless persecution? The documents in Openshaw's possession must be of vital importance to the men aboard that sailing ship. It is clear that this is not the work of a single man. One person could not commit 2 murders so flawlessly as to deceive 2 juries. They must be a group, determined and well-equipped. They want the documents at any cost. Thus you see that KKK is not the initials of an individual, but the symbol of an organization. But which organization? Leaning forward and lowering his voice, Sherlock Holmes asked, "Have you ever heard of the Ku Klux Klan?" "Never." Turning the pages of the encyclopedia, Holmes replied, "Here it is. The Ku Klux Klan, a name derived from the sound of a rifle being cocked. A dreadful organization founded by former Confederate soldiers after the American Civil War. It spread rapidly, particularly in Tennessee, Louisiana, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. The group used its power for political purposes, especially to terrorize black voters, but it also killed or expelled white opponents. Before striking, they issued peculiar but recognizable warnings. In some regions, it was an oak leaf. In others, orange or melon seeds. The recipient either renounced former actions or fled the country. Defiance invariably meant death, often in strange circumstances. The organization was so well structured and its methods so systematic that scarcely a case can be found where an opponent escaped disaster or where the perpetrators were identified. Despite efforts by the U.S. government and anti-racist groups in the South, the organization persisted for years before collapsing suddenly around 1869. Since then, it has reappeared only sporadically. Setting the encyclopedia aside, Holmes continued, "As you see, The collapse of the Klan coincides exactly with Openshaw's flight from America with those documents. He must have played some role in their downfall. It is no surprise, then, that he and his heirs have been hunted. That register and diary could expose prominent Southern figures. Those men will not rest until they recover the papers. Then the page we saw was precisely what we thought. As I recall, it recorded the sending of orange pips, the Klan's warning, to A, B, and C. Then it noted that A and B's affairs were completed or that they had fled, and finally that C was visited, which is never a good sign. Doctor, I hope we shall shed light on this dark affair. Young Openshaw's only hope lies in following my instructions. Since there is nothing more to be said or done tonight, would you hand me my violin? Let's try for half an hour to forget the dreadful weather outside and the even more dreadful plight of our visitor. By morning the storm had passed, and pale sunlight filtered through the clouds hanging over the city. When I went down to breakfast, Sherlock Holmes was already at the table. "Forgive me for not waiting," he said. "The Openshaw case will occupy me fully today. What course will you take?" "That depends on what my preliminary inquiries reveal. Perhaps in the final stage, I may go to Horsham." "You will not go there first." "No, I shall begin here." "Ring the bell, will you, so the maid may bring your coffee." While waiting, I picked up the unread newspaper from the table and glanced through it, but a headline caught my eye and made my blood run cold. "You are too late, Holmes," I cried. "Ah," he said, setting down his coffee cup. "I feared as much. What has happened?" His voice was calm, but he was clearly shaken. I saw the name Openshaw. The headline reads, "Tragedy near Waterloo Bridge." Shall I read it? "Last night, Police Constable Cook of H Division, on duty near Waterloo Bridge, heard a cry for help followed by the sound of a body falling into the water. Due to the extreme darkness and the violence of the storm, rescue efforts failed. An alarm was raised, and with the assistance of the river police, the body was eventually recovered. Papers found on the deceased identified him as John Openshaw, residing near Horsham. It is believed that he was hurrying to catch the last train from Waterloo Station and lost his way in the darkness, walking to the end of one of the wharves used by river steamers and falling into the river. As no signs of violence were found on the body, the death is believed to have been accidental. The incident highlights the need for greater safety measures along the river. We sat in silence for several minutes. I had never seen Holmes so shaken and distressed. "My pride is wounded," he finally said. "Deeply wounded. This is now a personal matter for me. As long as God grants me health and opportunity, I shall never abandon the pursuit of this gang. A man came to me for help, and I sent him to his death." He sprang from his chair and paced the room, clenching and unclenching his fists. His pale cheeks were flushed with anger. "These men must be devilishly clever," he cried at last. "How else could they have trapped him? The wharf is not on the station road, and the bridge would have been crowded even on such a night. Yes, Watson, the last laugh shall be mine. I must go at once." "To the police?" "No, I shall do their work myself. Once I have spun my web, they may come and catch the flies, but not before." I was separated from Holmes all day by my duties to my patients and returned to Baker Street only in the evening. Holmes had not yet come back. It was after 10 when he entered, pale and exhausted. He went straight to the sideboard, tore off a piece of bread, ate it eagerly, and washed it down with a glass of water. "You are hungry," I said. "Starving, but I've been so occupied since morning that I never thought of eating." "You have eaten nothing since breakfast?" "Not a bite. I had no time." "And have you made progress?" "Certainly. Any clues?" "I have them in the palm of my hand. We shall avenge young Openshaw. Come, Watson, let us send these men their own infernal symbol." He took an orange from the shelf, peeled it, and removed the seeds. He placed 5 of them in an envelope, wrote 4JOH inside the flap, sealed it, and addressed it to Captain James Calhoun, Bark Lone Star, Savannah, Georgia. "He will receive this when the ship docks," he said with a grim smile. "He will sleep no more, believing he will meet the same fate as Openshaw. Is Captain Calhoun the leader of the gang? I shall deal with the others later, but he comes first." "How did you identify him?" Holmes drew out a paper covered with names and dates. "I spent the entire day examining the records of the Marine Insurance Exchange. I traced all ships that called at Pondicherry in January and February of 1883 and studied their routes before and after. 36 vessels were large enough to sail from Pondicherry to England. Among them, the Lone Star immediately stood out. Though registered in London, it bore the name of an American state. Texas was called the Lone Star State. I was not certain, but I knew the ship had American ties. I then examined the Dundee port records and found that the Lone Star had been there in January of '85. Finally, I checked the list of ships currently in the Port of London, and the Lone Star arrived here last week. I went to Albert Dock and learned that she sailed for Savannah this morning. I telegraphed Gravesend and learned that she had passed there. With a southeast wind, she must now have passed the Goodwins and be near the Isle of Wight. What is your next move? They cannot escape me. I learned that the only Americans aboard are Calhoun and 2 companions. The rest are Finns or Germans. I also learned from the dock laborers that these 3 men were not on board last night. The mail steamer will carry my letter before the Lone Star reaches Savannah. I shall also telegraph the Savannah police that these 3 men are suspects in a murder committed here. But even the most perfect human plans have flaws. John Openshaw's killers never saw the 5 orange pips that would have warned them that a hunter as cunning and determined as themselves was on their trail. That year's storms were long and violent. We waited in vain for news of the Lone Star from Savannah. At last we learned only this. Somewhere in the Atlantic, a fragment of a ship bearing the carved letters L and S had been found among the waves. That was all we ever discovered of the fate of the Lone Star.